Three major stories to break down for you tonight. First, the Trump administration calls it a big win. The president securing trade concessions from the European Union today, avoiding a potential trade war on that front for now. Senator Lindsey Graham joins us to weigh in on that and much more. Then, breaking tonight, House Republicans introduce articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Will they vote before breaking for August recess? It's about to happen. Well, we'll ask Congressman Ron DeSantis when he's right here. And later, the president and his allies fighting back at his longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, over a leaked conversation of the pair discussing a possible payment over the story of a Playboy model alleging an affair with the president. Former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, is here to tell us what he thinks that leaked tape is really all about. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's appearance on Capitol Hill. Some lawmakers from both parties are expressing frustration with President Trump's foreign policy and a lack of information about that recent Trump-Putin-Helsinki summit. Late today, his top diplomat tried to reassure them. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has this report from Capitol Hill.
I personally made clear to the Russians there will be severe consequences for interference in our democratic processes.
Pompeo told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee he's been firm with Moscow, saying sanctions won't be eased.
There will be no relief of Crimea-related sanctions until Russia returns control of the Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine.
The Foreign Relations chairman put Pompeo in an awkward spot by criticizing President Trump's behavior.
What is it that causes the president to purposely create distrust in these institutions?
You somehow disconnect the administration's activities from the president's actions. They're the one and the same.
I notice that you are not responding to what I'm saying.
There were some testy moments with the panel's top Democrat, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, on the Trump-Putin summit.
Senator, I'm telling you what he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about, and I'm telling you what U.S. policy is today. I understand, Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No, you know, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions. My questions is to get to the truth. We don't know what the truth is. Did they agree to end the production and enrichment of uranium and plutonium for military programs?
Senator, I would welcome the chance to respond to your questions. If you'd let me finish, it would be most
simple yes or no.
I think it'd be most illuminating for the folks watching.
It's a simple yes or no.
We're engaged in patient diplomacy, but we will not let this drag out to no end. I emphasize this position in the productive discussions I had with Vice Chairman Kim Young-chol.
Pompeo also highlighted how pressure from President Trump and his administration has led to NATO allies spending more and making the alliance stronger.
Last year's $14.4 billion in new spending was a 5.1% increase. It was the largest in a generation. 8 allies will meet the 2% this year. 18 are on track to do so by 24.
Several lawmakers argued there must be a price when Russia or others attack the U.S., such as the election meddling. And there were appeals from senators for the Trump administration to use all the sanctions available to teach Moscow a lesson. Shannon?
All right, Mike Emanuel for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Signs of a trade thaw tonight between the U.S. and Europe. Both sides are hailing an agreement in principle to work towards zero tariffs and zero subsidies on non-automotive products. What does it mean? Well, Garrett Tenney has late details on what it means for the broader trade initiatives promoted by the president. Good evening, Garrett.
Shannon, good evening. Good to be with you. This is not the trade deal that most folks, including those in the White House, were expecting to get today. After weeks of threatening each other with a full-blown trade war, today the U.S. and European Union did a 180.
This was a very big day for free and fair trade. Very big day indeed.
Together in the Rose Garden, President Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker announced a wide-ranging agreement meant to stave off further trade hostilities between the U.S. and Europe. This deal is also a big win for President Trump because it includes just about everything he's been asking for. Both sides agreed to work towards zero tariffs on goods outside of the auto industry, no new tariffs as these negotiations play out, and to reassess the tariffs imposed over the past few months, including those on steel and aluminum, and to reform the World Trade Organization, as well as significantly, the EU agreed to buy more U.S. goods, including soybeans and natural gas.
When I was invited by the president to the White House, I had one intention. I had the intention to make a deal today, and we made a deal today.
This pivot towards the U.S. by the EU comes just a week after President Trump called the European bloc a foe of the U.S. and blasted Germany at the NATO summit over its multi-billion-dollar gas deal with Russia. The president striking a much different tone tonight, tweeting this picture of him and the EU commissioner hugging with the caption, "Obviously, the European Union is represented by Juncker and the United States is represented by yours truly. Love each other." This new deal also provides a bit of good news for America's farmers who've been hit by China's decision to buy soybeans and produce from other countries amid its growing trade dispute with the U.S. That is why the White House has been getting calls from a lot of Republican lawmakers who are nervous the president's strategy of using tariffs to get better trade deals may not end well. But tonight, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said today's deal is proof that the strategy is working.
I really think there would have been zero chance of this happening had it not been for the very firm tariff and trade policy the president put into effect.
Now, while the U.S. and EU are launching an executive working group to implement this new agreement, the two sides are also preparing new tariffs targeting billions of dollars in goods just in case these talks fall through. So lots of love today, but don't forget, we've got one in the chamber for you if this turns south.
All right. Garrett, thank you very much.
You got it.
Good look at it. Some Republicans are hammering the Trump administration on trade and Russia. So how does the Republican senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, feel? He sits on Senate Judiciary and Armed Services Committees, among many other things.
Yes.
Thanks for taking a break to come see us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I want to play a little bit of what the president had to say meeting in the Rose Garden today with the president of the European Commission about where we go on trade.
This will open markets for farmers and workers, increase investment, and lead to greater prosperity in both the United States and the European Union. It will also make trade fairer and more reciprocal, my favorite word, reciprocal.
So what do you think about what the president's doing on trade?
With the European Union, it could be a major breakthrough. Maybe the biggest change between us and Europe since the end of World War II, if he can pull it off. When it comes to China, they're the biggest cheater. The tariffs are hurting, but we got to experience some pain to bring about change. Some will stick with the president, and if he can put a win on the board with Europe, then eventually Canada and Mexico, all of us turn our attention on China, be a home run.
And China, along with some others, they're obviously targeting middle America. A lot of people, farmers, agriculture people, they know have supported this president.
Right.
They're very precise about what they're doing.
Well, they are. And, you know, BMW makes BMW's largest plants in Greenville, South Carolina. They sell 81,000 cars to China every year. There's a 40% tariff on cars made in Greenville going into China. That's hurting BMW. It's hurting Iowa farmers, but we got to push through it because China cheats. And if somebody doesn't bring them to heel, they can destroy our economy. So I'm willing to suffer through this, but I want the Europeans on our side. I want the Canadians and Mexico on our side against China. And you see the first step toward a unified approach toward China, beginning with Europe.
So you think there'll be short-term pain for long-term gain when it comes to these trade issues?
We've got to, yes. If we don't change the way China does business, they can put Boeing out of business, they can put BMW out of business, they can destroy the world economy because they have such power and they cheat and they steal intellectual property. So Trump's right about China. If he can put wins on the board with Europe, get a better NAFTA deal and focus on China, then he could be a historic president in terms of changing trade.
Okay, let's talk about Russia now. And let's start with the Secretary of State testifying on Capitol Hill before the Senate today. Here's what he said about the issue of Crimea.
I want to assure this committee that the United States does not and will not recognize the Kremlin's purported annexation of Crimea. We stand together with allies, partners, and the international community in our commitment to Ukraine and its territorial integrity.
Has this administration been tough enough on Russia?
They've been tougher than Obama, but the goal is to get Russia to change their behavior. Pompeo's an outstanding pick for Secretary of State. What they're doing with Iran is a game changer. Pompeo called out the Ayatollahs of enriching themselves at the expense of the Iranian people. The president is kind of being like Reagan toward the Soviet Union. Iran is an evil empire. And I think we can break the back of the regime. And the best way to do that is to help the people. But when it comes to Russia, I've got new sanctions, very hard hitting, because it's not just enough to be tougher than Obama. You got to get Russia to quit doing what they're doing. And if you believe Dan Coates, and I do, they're still trying to interfere in our elections in 2018. So I'm coming up with the sanctions from hell against Russia, and I hope the president will get behind it.
I know it's a bipartisan measure.
Yes, very bipartisan.
Okay, so we'll see where he goes on that. But as you said, very important that the secretary was speaking directly to the Iranian people this weekend in his remarks to them. Do you think they're getting the message through the leadership, that it obviously is at odds with its own people on many things?
For 8 years, Obama basically licked the boots of the Ayatollah for a nuclear deal that proved to be very flawed. This president saw the Ayatollah for who he is. He's a religious Nazi. They've been trying to build a nuclear weapon, not a nuclear power program for peaceful purposes. There's two groups that would use a nuclear weapon if they could get it: ISIS, Al-Qaeda types, and the Iranian regime. This president with Pompeo sees through the smokescreen, and they understand that the Iranian regime is an enemy of the world, not just the Iranian people. And with an effort to reimpose sanctions and an information campaign informing the Iranian people of how badly they're being treated, I think we can bring this regime down. And if you could replace the Iranian regime with something better, and almost anything would be better, it'd be the biggest change in the Mideast in my lifetime. Probably be the biggest accomplishment any president could have since the end of the Cold War.
And we all know about the power vacuum when there isn't a backup plan after individuals leave who have been dictators or theocrats in one way or another. Okay, so let's talk about the Supreme Court nomination.
Yes.
You sit on the Judiciary Committee. Judge Kavanaugh is making his way through the Hill.
Right.
Now there are 2 meetings with Democrats, at least 2 that we know of on the schedule, that are going to happen. But here is what the lead Democrat in the Senate says about the nominee.
If Kavanaugh would have let Nixon off the hook, what is he willing to do for President Trump? Alarm bells should be going off for anyone who believes in checks and balances.
In the meantime, you have a Republican colleague, Senator Rand Paul, who says he's undecided on Kavanaugh. He wants to stop and wait and see. You need every vote to stick together. It's going to happen.
There is no way in hell that Rand Paul is going to be the deciding vote to stop Kavanaugh from going to the court. He's the most qualified person the president could have picked. He has an outstanding resume. He's been a judge for over a decade now. He's a conservative's conservative. He is a home run pick. There'll be more than a handful of Democrats voting for this guy because they'll lose their seat if they don't, and Rand Paul is not going to be the deciding vote. He might vote no if Democrats give him cover, but there's no way he's going to deny Kavanaugh a seat on the Supreme Court because he's just too well qualified.
Well, and every vote will count on that front. Thank you for covering a lot of topics with us tonight, Senator. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Well, the president's fighting back tonight at his former attorney, Michael Cohen, after the leak of a taped conversation the two had, appearing to discuss buying the rights to a Playboy model's story of an alleged affair with the president. Ellison Barber is tracking all the twists and turns and joins us with the latest. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening to you. So the Wall Street Journal has a new report out tonight on this as well. They're saying that Michael Cohen secretly recorded CNN Chris Cuomo earlier this year, and that Cohen reportedly talked about arranging the hush payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels, telling Cuomo, "I did it on my own."
The Wall Street Journal also breaking news related to the tape we've already heard. Citing a source familiar with the matter, the Journal reports that Cohen created a shell company in September of 2016 with the intention of buying the rights to Karen McDougal's story. McDougal and Daniels say they had affairs with Trump. Federal investigators seized 12 audio items when they raided Michael Cohen's office in April. The now public Cohen-Trump recording has led to a number of questions and a number of responses. Today, Twitter responses from the president, his personal lawyer, and Cohen's lawyer. In the Oval Office, a CNN correspondent tried to ask President Trump about Cohen and the tape.
Mr. President, did Michael Cohen betray you?
That's Caitlin Collins.
Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation, Mr. President?
The president did not answer her questions, but according to Collins and CNN, the White House banned her from an open press event because of those questions. CNN says, quote, Collins was told by White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications Bill Shine and Press Secretary Sarah Sanders that her questions were inappropriate. They were not. Just because the White House is uncomfortable with the question regarding the news of the day doesn't mean the question isn't relevant and shouldn't be asked. The White House Correspondents Association says the administration's behavior here is inappropriate, wrong-headed, and weak, and that it cannot stand. But the White House is not backing down. In a statement, Sanders says a reporter refused to leave when asked, and, quote, our staff informed her she was not welcome to participate in the next event, but made clear that any other journalist from her network could attend.
And as for Fox News, we stand with Caitlin Collins and CNN on this. In a statement, Fox News President Jay Wallace said, quote, "We stand in strong solidarity with CNN for the right to full access for our journalists as part of a free and unfettered press." Shannon?
Another interesting day at the White House.
Always.
All right, thank you, Ellison. Okay, now for live reaction to all of these stories, Fox News contributor and former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to have you with us tonight. I find it interesting that even critics of the president say in this recorded tape, it doesn't necessarily show any wrong or criminal doing. Laney Davis, Politico said this about him. Laney Davis, of course, now representing Michael Cohen, links back to the Clintons back in the 90s and beyond. They say Davis, who served as special counsel to then President Bill Clinton in the late 1990s, argues Wednesday morning that while the tape offers little in terms of evidence of a crime, it gets to the lies and truth of the president and his team. Governor, why do you think it's leaked? Why is it out there?
You know, I honestly, when I first heard there were going to be some tapes, I thought, oh boy, this will be an explosive story. Then when I heard the tapes, my reaction was, gee, where's Geraldo and Al Capone's vault? I mean, there's nothing in there. And it really was such a, I guess, a letdown, if you will, because the story had been hyped as something just absolutely mind-boggling, and it wasn't. And I don't think it did any damage to the president, and especially if you listen to people who are objective, which are very few when it comes to this president, people like Professor Alan Dershowitz, who say there was nothing there that was criminal, nothing impeachable. This was a conversation, and it shouldn't have been recorded. It was played, and nothing came from it.
Well, and they seem to be trying to signal to the White House or to the president that Cohen has more tapes, that there may be more to come. And this edition from Laney Davis in the New York Times, it says that he told the Times on Tuesday night that Mr. Cohen released the tape because he is, quote, on a new path. It's a reset button to tell the truth and to let the chips fall where they may. Is that supposed to be a warning for the president?
I'm sure it may be intended that way. But I think every one of us need to be more concerned about the fact that God is recording every word we say and will be accountable for it than if a lawyer happens to record certain conversations. But that's privileged information, and I think he's going to have a hard time convincing judges, if they look at this from a legal standpoint, that this is somehow okay for a lawyer to release information that was considered to be private and never, ever intended for a public audience.
Yeah, God's reading our texts and our emails too, but I also assume somebody in the government is, so you have to watch everything that you say and think, because somebody's monitoring it at all times. Now, I want to talk to you about another very serious case we've talked about before, this idea of imprisoning a U.S. pastor who's lived in Turkey for decades and has led a congregation there. He's being accused by by the administration there of all kinds of wrongdoing and nefarious activities, all of which he vehemently denies. Here is his daughter speaking out yesterday.
My father is now dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, and he's been permanently changed by this experience. Even when this ordeal is over, he'll never be the same person that he was. That being said, I cannot tell you how proud I am of my father and what an example of Christ's love he continues to be.
So we got word today that he has been moved out of jail into home confinement, or at least allowed to go home, but this trial's not going away. What do you make of it, Governor?
Well, he's got until October in home arrest, then he goes to trial. He may get out. Let's hope he does. This is a totally trumped-up charge by the Turks. I think we all got to understand, Erdogan is not a guy that we can trust. I'm worried that he's in NATO. I'm worried that we have to deal with him as if he's a friend, and he's not. And his imprisonment has been called into question, thankfully, by the president, by the vice president, and by the Secretary of State. And they have pushed hard, and if it were not for them, Pastor Brunson would still be in a very pathetic prison. So thank God we have some administration officials at the highest levels who care about people who are being politically imprisoned.
Yeah, and it's great to see bipartisan agreement in the Senate to push back on Turkey on this as well. Governor, always great to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
All right, late breaking news. Articles of impeachment drafted and introduced against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Catherine Herridge joins us with details.
We're tired of the Justice Department giving us the finger and not giving us the information.
And we'll be joined live by House Freedom Caucus member Ron DeSantis to get his take when we return. Breaking tonight, House Republicans introducing articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has late-breaking details. Catherine.
Eyewitnesses say there was initially a lot of smoke in the area, which also houses a number of other embassies, including India's. The man reportedly injured his hand as he set off the device, but no one else in the area was hurt, we're told. The woman was also detained earlier in the day after spraying gasoline on herself in an attempt to set herself on fire. Again, a man setting off a small device outside the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. He's reportedly the only one who was injured. Eyewitnesses say there was initially a lot of smoke in the area, but from live pictures from the area, it now looks like things are back to normal there. Of course, stay with Fox News Channel for more on this developing story out of Beijing. Now back to regular programming already in progress.
Escalation on Fox News.
Not only have subpoenas been ignored, but information has been hidden. The efforts have been stonewalled. And I guess for us, it's all about transparency.
We're tired of the Justice Department giving us the finger and not giving us the information we're entitled to do our constitutional duty.
Senior Justice Department and FBI officials met with Republicans from the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees for 2 hours earlier today. After the meeting, Congressman Meadows said there was agreement that FBI agent Peter Strzok avoided too many questions during his public testimony earlier this month, and that Strzok can't answer this line of questioning from Congressman Jim Jordan about the opposition research firm behind the dossier Fusion GPS and its co-founder Glenn Simpson.
This is the frustration that every single member of this committee feels is when Agent Strzok won't answer, well, more importantly, the American people feel when Agent Strzok won't answer fundamental questions like the guy he references in an email, Corn and Simpson, and won't tell me who they are. This is unbelievable.
Sir, it is as frustrating to me as it is to you.
The closed-door depositions from Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page identified records previously unknown to lawmakers about at least one file documenting the FBI's efforts to verify the Trump dossier. Those records will now be provided, and the issue is timing. Did the FBI try to verify the allegations before the dossier was used as evidence in the surveillance warrant application? Heading into the meeting, Justice Department officials indicated to Fox News that they believe they have complied with the majority of congressional subpoenas. On the articles of impeachment tonight, there was no immediate response. Shannon.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you very much. Will the resolution to impeach Rosenstein be considered tomorrow before the House breaks for August recess? Let's talk to Republican Congressman from Florida, Ron DeSantis, who sits on the House Oversight Committee. Good to have you with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because unless it comes up as a, quote, privileged resolution tomorrow, it's going to go away for weeks while you guys go home and do other things that you have to do with constituents and other things. Is this a PR stunt, as some critics are saying?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's, look, we've been doing this round and round for months and months and months. And I've been saying for months and months, if you want to change their behavior, you have to impose a sanction on them. Now, I think the easiest thing would have been to hold Rosenstein in contempt of Congress, and also hold potentially people in the FBI, because when Peter Strzok is avoiding all those questions, he's doing it at the direction of people in the FBI. And these were some basic questions that the American people have the right to do. So you do need to have a sanction. And I think the reason why Mark and Jim filed that is because, although it was not filed as a privilege, it could be at some point in the future. So I think they're laying down a marker, letting justice know that Congress means business, and then hopefully be able to do something short of that to get what we want. It'd be much easier for everyone to just get the documents, but at some point Congress has to stand up for itself. We've not done a good job. Some of us have wanted to be aggressive, but the institution as a whole has been very weak, not just with this, but all the way back to the IRS scandal when we tried to hold John Koskinen accountable and didn't have enough votes to do it.
Well, you know, the DOJ has repeatedly said in recent months and weeks that they have been more forthcoming than ever in the past, in history, that they have gone beyond, quote, guardrails in the past with respect to what information they could give you. Here's the Deputy Attorney General a few weeks ago talking about this idea that he could potentially be impeached.
I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
So they say they're turning over information, great volumes of it. Is it quantity or quality of what you think you're missing?
Then why haven't they turned over the information about how Crossfire Hurricane started, the Trump-Russia collusion case that was opened by Peter Strzok, who said that they were going to stop Trump and that you needed an insurance policy? Very simple to do that. Why haven't they given us answers about whether the FBI or Obama Justice Department did anything to induce any type of surveillance or spying on Trump's campaign prior to July 31st, 2016? Those are very simple questions. They either did something or they didn't, and yet they will not do that. So I think what they're masters of is producing a lot of documents that really aren't what we're looking for, and it's kind of like a Chewbacca defense. Hey, look over here, we're giving you this. Well, that's not what we want. What we want is actually very easy to produce, and they just continue to refuse to produce it. And then talk about guardrails. Peter Strzok went over guardrails when he said that he was going to stop Trump from being president. These guys went over guardrails and how they conducted the investigation, and the American people need the truth about all this.
It seems like from what we've heard from some of your fellow members who were part of the questioning of Lisa Page, and you were part of that as well, that she gave them a lot more guidance and information that kind of cleared some things up, pointed you guys in another direction. Was it a fruitful exercise?
Yeah, so there's now inquiry about additional facts involving the dossier and how that dossier ended up in the FISA application, which it did. It was really the critical component. Because, yes, there are redactions, but, I mean, that was kind of front and center is what they rolled out
we can tell.
as the reason why.
Sure
I mean, if there was stronger evidence, you would have led with the stronger evidence. So that dossier was there. And so I think that there's going to be follow-up from there. But then also I think Peter Strzok's going to be brought back in. I mean, Lisa Page was very honest about the meaning of those text messages. I mean, Strzok acted like, you know, the meaning of is wasn't is, and he was giving these outlandish explanations that just weren't credible. And even the Inspector General said this guy wasn't credible with how he's doing it. So that could be an interesting contrast as well.
Well, we'll stay tuned to hear more potentially from both of them, potentially in a public setting as well. And as we await, let us know how you do over recess. A lot to get done here in Washington, but I know folks back at home want to bend your ear as well. So, Congressman, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yep.
All right, a gruesome attack in California. An illegal immigrant allegedly attacks his wife with a chainsaw. And that alleged attacker had been arrested and deported, we are told, 11 times. Trace has the story. And a surprise ruling on gun rights by the liberal Ninth Circuit Court. Details coming up in our Western Roundup. 3 U.S.-based airlines trying a creative solution to satisfy Beijing's demand they stop identifying Taiwan as a country separate from the Chinese mainland. United, Delta, and American have now stopped identifying Taipei as being inside Taiwan, but they're also not saying it's part of China, like other global carriers. Still, Republican Senator Tom Cotton says the Chinese Communist Party's obsession with Taiwan is pathetic and, quote, it's disappointing that American Airlines, Delta, and United complied with this ultimatum. Well, in California, the media is worrying that a gruesome chainsaw attack could become a flashpoint in the immigration debate. Can that explain why you may not have heard about this story? Well, Trace Gallagher has new details tonight. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. When it comes to the debate about sanctuary cities and California's immigration policies, this might be the highest profile case since the death of Kate Steinle a few years ago. The latest attack happened in Whittier, about 20 miles from downtown Los Angeles. 32-year-old Alejandro Alvarez is accused of attacking and badly wounding his wife with a chainsaw, spraying her blood all over himself and his 3 young boys. Aside from the gruesome violence, what makes this case notable is that since 2005, Alvarez had been deported 11 times. And his criminal record goes well beyond deportation, including convictions for drunk driving and drug possession. Immigration advocates fear this type of sensational case could be used as fodder to boost the president's immigration policies and to increase the criticism of California for sheltering illegal immigrants, including criminal aliens. They say Alvarez is no more representative of illegal immigrants than the Las Vegas shooter is representative of white men. But groups that oppose illegal immigration say we have plenty of homegrown criminals without foreign nationals joining in. Whether more illegal immigration leads to higher crime has been widely studied, hotly debated, and largely inconclusive. Yet Americans believe it to be true. A 2017 Gallup poll showed that nearly half of those polled think immigration does lead to higher crime, which is why building a wall along the southern border continues to gain momentum across the country. country. On top of that, new numbers from Judicial Watch show that in just the past several weeks, hundreds of illegal immigrants have been arrested for violent crimes, from a brutal rape by a Lyft driver in Northern California to human smuggling and child endangerment in New Mexico and Texas. And finally, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, has just filed a detainer against an illegal immigrant in Florida accused of shooting and killing a police officer. And to make matters worse, over the past 10 years, the Haitian immigrant had been arrested numerous times, but local police never notified federal authorities. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher live for us in Los Angeles. Thank you. It's hot as blazes in California. That story tops tonight's Western Roundup. Portions of Yosemite National Park forced to close for the first time in 30 years as wildfires wreak havoc across the region. More than 3,400 firefighters are working to contain the blaze. One firefighter has already been killed near Yosemite. 7 others have been injured. Montana governor and potential 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Steve Bullock claims a new IRS policy is basically a swipe at social welfare groups and unions. They often run political ads using information from the IRS to target political enemies. Now the IRS is making that a bit more difficult by not requiring many tax-exempt groups to disclose the identities of their major donors. Bullock says the IRS is allowing donors to cover their tracks ahead of the, quote, most momentous midterms in a generation. Well, a big victory for gun rights coming from an unexpected place. The typically left-leaning Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling the Second Amendment does guarantee the right to openly carry a gun in public for self-defense purposes. The decision found Hawaii overstepped its bounds in its efforts to regulate firearms possession outside the home. And while we've yet to learn the identity of Tuesday's $543 million Mega Millions jackpot, we do know the winning ticket was sold in San Jose, California. The retailer, Ernie's Liquors in San Jose, got a $1 million bonus for selling the ticket. The winner now has 1 year to claim his or her winnings. Well, major issues California politicians are trying to tackle include immigration, homelessness, poverty, crime, and plastic straws. That's right. San Francisco is the latest California city banning passing legislation to ban plastic drinking straws and utensils. Our panel's here to discuss the pros and cons. Leslie Marshall and Larry O'Connor get their say when we return. While facing stinging criticism over homelessness, soaring poverty, drug use, and illegal immigration, cities on the West Coast are getting tough, taking aim at plastic straws. San Francisco is the latest city to ban all so-called single-use plastics. Seattle was the first major city to ban these kinds of things, levying a $250 fine for violations. But Santa Barbara is actually home to the strictest plastic prohibition in the country. Hefty fines for violators and even possible jail time. Tonight's panel, Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall and radio host of WMAL here in Washington, D.C., Larry O'Connor. Welcome to you both.
Shannon.
Hi, Shannon. Leslie, people going to jail over plastic straws? This is not The Onion. This is for real.
It is not The Onion. It is for real. But nobody's going to go to jail. And you have me here on tape saying that. I don't think they are. What they're trying to do is emphasize how stringent the city of Santa Barbara, where I'm going this weekend, as a matter of fact, wants to be on this issue. But there are 2 problems that I have with this, to be honest. I like what Seattle did, 2 things, which is imposed a fine of $250, as you said, Shannon, but also they've exempted the disabled, because there are some people that need to drink from stores that don't have an option. So I think that Santa Barbara needs to look at that again. And we also have to look at Santa Barbara. The marine life is being hurt by plastic straws and other plastics, and the marine life is the way that many people get their livelihood, and a lot of tourists come to Santa Barbara centered around that marine life, whether they're fishing or whether they're eating it, famous fish and chips on the pier right there off the Pacific Coast Highway.
Larry, she makes her compelling argument, and I'll add this from San Francisco supervisor Katie Tang. She says, San Francisco has been a pioneer of environmental change, and it's time for us to find alternatives to the plastic that is choking our marine ecosystems and littering our streets, although we've heard other things are littering the streets there too, Larry.
Yeah, I am so tempted to call this a straw man argument, Shannon. Think about this. Last week, right here, this same group of three amazing people on Fox News, we were talking about how the city of San Francisco wants to give illegal immigrants the right to vote. So they want to give people who are in this country illegally the right to vote, but they don't want us to be able to use a straw. They want to put a waitress in jail for giving my kid a bendy straw with a soda drink. It really is ridiculous, and it tells you the priorities of people in California right now. I dare I say, I think this is the last straw for many people in that
Okay, I'm going to
state.
stop you there. Let me read you something that comes in from Noah Rothman, CommentaryMagazine.com. He says, the combination of technocratic arrogance, insularity, and condescension displayed by the left's straw banners would be irksome enough, but our social engineers are not done inconveniencing you. Instead of disposable plastic straws, Americans are being asked to switch to biodegradable paper straws, which function precisely as advertised. They biodegrade upon contact with fluid. Leslie.
Well, then I think there's Larry can look into a future in biodegradable paper straws that don't fall apart when you drink through them. Look, this is not the only issue in California. And Larry, I do want to remind you that Santa Barbara is not in San Francisco. It's in between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
But San Francisco just voted for this as well.
Yeah, they're all doing some form
of it. But
But
Santa Barbara's the one that's saying, hey, we're going to give you up to 6 months jail time. Yeah. And like I said, it's not going to happen. The environment is a huge issue in California. And you have to look at the things that we have done, not only with the ocean, but also with our air quality. If you look at pictures of smog years ago versus today, there's been a vast improvement. We can multitask. I know that I do. And you can do it in or outside of California. But in California, although we do care about health care and immigration, we do care very much so about the environment. And plastics, National Geographic just shows not only with marine life, but with our oceans, it contributes to the pollution. And by the way, that contributes to us in our bodies, because we eat that fish that is
Okay, let me read you something from The Economist. They say this. Last October, scientists at the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research in Germany found that 10 rivers, 2 in Africa and the rest in Asia, discharge 90% of all plastic marine debris. The Yangtze alone carries 1.5 metric tons a year. I refuse to translate that because I don't recognize metrics because I'm an American. But Larry, they're saying the problem is Africa and Asia.
I know. I've been to Santa Barbara and all up and down the Pacific coast. There's not a whole lot of littering there. I mean, California is full of so many virtuous people like Leslie that they'll never litter to pollute their beautiful coast. Why do they even need this law, since Californians are so superior to the rest of us? This is just virtue signaling. This is a bunch of elected officials trying to tell their constituents how much they care. And again, it does tell you their priorities. You know, just now you had a story about an illegal immigrant in Whittier, where my kids live, Whittier, California, who took a chainsaw to his
Allegedly.
wife. And I think that's a little more serious. Maybe our elected officials should be looking at that story instead of worrying about what we drink our frozen lattes out of.
All right, Leslie and Larry, we are not going to come to a consensus on this.
Not tonight.
Leslie, I will say he gave you a lot of nice compliments there and talked about how fantastic the people of California are.
So virtuous.
So we will leave it at that, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you both.
Thanks.
A rookie police officer in Perth Amboy, New Jersey is being hailed as a hero for saving a man's life. Look and listen to this.
Move! 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 Move!
Oh. Wow, that is the footage from Patrolman Kyle Savoya's body camera. He noticed a man on the tracks as a commuter train was approaching. Savoya ran toward the train, yelling for the man to get off the tracks, trying to motion at the train to stop in time. As you can see there, with no time to spare, the man gets off the track. We were told that an unidentified man was very distraught and taken to a hospital for observation. The patrolman tries to talk him through it there. Patrolman Savoya is tonight's Midnight Hero. Good for him. Well, as for you, we appreciate you. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good night for now from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream for Fox News at Night.